Welcome to today's Explainer. You know, we've talked before about the incredible sacrifices made by the family of Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him. But today, well, the tone is going to shift a bit. We're moving away from those big, broad family dynamics into a trial that is deeply personal, completely solitary, and honestly, pretty somber. We're going to look at what is arguably the ultimate test of survival and devotion, and it all centers around one phenomenal woman, Hajar, peace be upon her. Okay, so let's just dive right into this because there's a question here that totally defies basic geography and logic. How exactly does a completely barren, lifeless valley transform into the center of a massive global pilgrimage? We're talking millions of people every single year. I really want you to hold that staggering contrast in your mind for a second. On one hand, you have this ancient, totally unforgiving reality of hot sand and utter isolation. And on the other, you have the bustling, modern, spiritually charged city of Mecca. Bridging that massive gap, well, it all comes down to a story of a mother, a child, and an absolutely unbelievable level of resilience. To really grasp the weight of this story, we kind of have to strip away the shiny marble floors and the towering modern hotels you see in Mecca today. You've got to picture the valley as it originally was. Absolutely no greenery, no water, nothing but harsh, jagged rocks and searing, blinding heat. By divine command, Hajar and her infant son, baby Ishmael, were left entirely alone in this desolate valley. Just imagine the intense vulnerability for a second. There weren't any trade routes passing through, no neighboring tribes to call for help, just sheer, deafening isolation. Literally just a mother, her baby, a small bag of dates, and a skin of water that, let's face it, was going to run out fast. And what's truly profound here is the emotional core of this narrative. Because this isn't just a survival story, it's a literal masterclass in trust and absolute faith. The defining moment happens when Prophet Ibrahim begins to walk away, leaving his family behind in this wasteland. Now, human nature completely dictates panic in a moment like this, right? The terrifying reality of the desert should have brought immediate despair. Just the physical separation of a family in such a dangerous environment is an agonizing concept to even wrap your head around. Yet it sets the stage for a legendary display of spiritual fortitude. So as Prophet Ibrahim walked away, Hazrat Hajar actually followed him, seeking some kind of clarity. She kept asking him why he was leaving them in a valley with no people and literally zero provisions. Getting no immediate reply, she finally stops, and she asks one absolutely vital question. Did Allah command you to do this? And Prophet Ibrahim paused. He turned to her and simply answered yes. It was a divine command. Now, here is the absolutely crucial point. Her immediate, unwavering response. The second she heard that this was a divine decree, Hazrat Hajar completely stopped questioning. She stood there in the scorching desert and uttered this iconic, truly monumental line. Then Allah will not waste us. I mean, really let those words sink in. She didn't say it was going to be easy. She definitely didn't say she wouldn't suffer, but she declared with absolute certainty that they wouldn't be abandoned to ruin. This statement right here, it's the ultimate, perfect expression of tawakkul, that complete, unshakable trust in God, staring directly into the face of absolute despair and certain death. But here's the thing about trust. It doesn't mean just sitting idly by. Pretty soon, those meager provisions ran out. The harsh desert sun beat down, and severe thirst started to set in for both the mother and her infant. Baby Ismail began to cry out in distress. And right here, the whole pace of our story shifts. It goes from this quiet, steadfast submission to frantic, desperate urgency. Driven by a mother's fierce love and total desperation, Hazrat Hajar left her crying baby in the shade and started desperately seeking help, looking out across the vast, empty landscape from the two hills of Safa and Marwa. And this brilliantly illustrates the balance between faith and action. She didn't just casually look around once. She ran back and forth between the hills of Safa and Marwa exactly 7 times. To put that into perspective, we're talking about running over 3 kilometers in scorching desert heat shortly after giving birth. Just imagine the physical exhaustion, the immense dehydration, the sheer panic of hearing her child crying in the distance while pushing her failing body up and down those rocky inclines. Yes, it was a frantic search for water, but it was also a very active manifestation of absolute faith. She was doing absolutely everything within her human capacity and leaving the ultimate outcome to the divine. This frantic exertion builds up to this absolutely extraordinary resolution. On her 7th run, utterly exhausted, having reached the absolute physical limits of human endurance, she heard a sound. She rushed back to her baby, and right when things seemed literally impossibly hopeless, the divine intervention she had trusted in finally arrived. All that urgent tension breaks into this profound calmness and triumph. The barren earth broke open. Right at the feet of baby Ismail, a spring of pure, cool water suddenly gushed forth right in the middle of this lifeless desert. This is Zamzam. Hazrat Hajar immediately started gathering the earth around it to contain the gushing water, drinking from it, and finally being able to nurse her child. The bursting of the Zamzam spring wasn't just some lucky geographical anomaly, right? It was the direct, miraculous reward for her unbreakable patience, her grueling physical struggle, and her flawless trust. That water quite literally brought life back to the valley, eventually attracting passing tribes to settle there. And remarkably, that exact same spring continues to flow today, thousands of years later, nourishing millions. Which brings us to a much, much larger truth. You see, this story isn't just some ancient historical footnote. It carries a massive message for humanity that echoes straight through the centuries. We're looking at a historical miracle that forged an enduring global legacy. By connecting this ancient timeline directly back to our present day, we can really anchor why this event is so incredibly important. Because what happened in that isolated valley, it definitely didn't stay in that valley. It completely changed the spiritual geography of the world forever. Just consider the breathtaking contrast between then and now. Back then, a lonely, exhausted mother and her crying child, completely alone in a barren, silent desert. Now, millions upon millions of pilgrims from every single corner of the globe travel annually to that exact same spot. As part of the Hajj and Umrah rituals, these millions perform the sa'i, which is the act of walking and running between the hills of Safa and Marwa 7 times. They are literally retracing her exact footsteps. It's just an awe-inspiring, lasting memorial to a woman who utterly refused to give up, elevating her desperate, lonely struggle into one of the most celebrated acts of worship on the entire planet. So when we distill the major lessons from this remarkable historical event, a few incredibly vital themes pop out. First, patience, especially when exercised for a higher divine purpose, brings immense, oftentimes unimaginable reward. Second, struggle is absolutely not a sign of abandonment. It's actually a fundamental part of faith. Hajar ran, she exerted maximum effort. And finally, true patience and trust yield unimaginable paths to provision, or rizq. Her patience didn't just save her and her son, it quite literally provided sustenance, water, and peace for the countless generations that followed. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought. Look, we all face times when our resources feel totally depleted, when we feel isolated, and when the landscape of our lives looks entirely devoid of hope. So I have to ask you, how can you apply Hazrat Hajar's unwavering patience to the seemingly barren moments in your own life? How can you combine active, persistent struggle with the absolute certainty that your efforts will not be wasted? Keep that question in the back of your mind as you face your own personal challenges, and never, ever underestimate the miraculous springs that might just be waiting to burst forth. Thank you so much for joining me, and as always, keep learning.